Hi, everybody. Welcome to UX and Tame. This is Juliet, and I'm super excited to have you here again. Yes, I started 2023 season again, and I cannot believe it. We've been waiting for today's session for a while. We've been having a lot of life happening. So I'm glad that, again, we are able to have the guest speakers that we're going to have today. And I'm super passionate about this topic. I think is people sometimes like to skip it or don't see it as powerful. And I would say that a miracle and magic can happen when you can really empower your coworkers and stakeholders. Is going to do big things for the company. Is going to be amazing things for the users. So let's have our guest speakers in. So hey Dan,
Hello.
hey Ildikó, how are you?
Hi. We're great.
Hi there. Doing well.
Nice. Really nice to have you both of you here. Why don't we start telling people about who you are? What do you do? Dan, do you want to start?
For sure. My name's Dan Bradigan. I'm a lead product designer at Vacasa, headquartered in Portland, Portland, Oregon, that is. And I have been with the company for a couple of years. I have a split focus between enterprise tools and owner accounts. And that's a little bit about me. Ildikó, how about you?
Hey, my name is Ildikó Tóth, and I used to work for Vacasa until very recently. I was a senior product designer there, and I was on enterprise tools, so we shared a lot of real estate over design. And I'm going to be starting a new job contracting with Audible pretty soon here.
Yay, that's amazing. Yeah, congrats. And one of my favorite questions, because people always surprise me with this one, is like something fun or unique about you that no one else knows. Dan, yes?
Ildikó, do you want to go first?
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Sure. And some people will know this, but I think the two of you don't. So I was a competitive rower in college. And I actually rode in the same boat as a Canadian woman who went on to represent her country in the 2012 Olympics in London. And I actually went to go see her. This was after I graduated. So kind of a fun thing. I actually stopped rowing because I had a major back injury. So I switched to rock climbing and mountain climbing, and I have summited over 10 peaks in the Pacific Northwest Cascade Range. So I guess my self-care routine is kind of type 2 fun, which just means like you're not quite having fun while you're doing it, but afterwards it's like really great stories, and I don't know, somehow it turns fun in your brain.
So much fun. That's so powerful and cool. Yes. I hate heights, so I cannot do it, but it always looks like such a workout and so much strength, definitely. Yeah. Dan, can you top up that?
Yeah. We'll see. I'm not sure, but when I was 17, I got struck by lightning. So
What?
A little scarier and not quite as ambitious or cool. But yeah, I got hit by lightning when I was out on an outward bound trip, a kayaking trip along the coast of Maine, and there was a big angry storm coming in. So we sought refuge on the wrong island because apparently I was sitting on the roots of a tree and got struck and I got thrown back.
Wow.
And yeah, it was pretty cool. It was interesting.
What is that percentage? I feel like that's like that never happens.
It's pretty unlikely. It's pretty uncommon. But one even scarier fact is that once you're struck by lightning, apparently the statistics show that you are more likely to be struck. So pray for me.
Wow, I would be so scared. Oh, yes, definitely both of you have really good ones. So thank you so much for sharing. Well, let's start with why did you both of you ended up in design? Like how did you get interested in it?
Ildikó, do you want to go first?
Always, I will go first. So my first paying job was actually a weekend job in high school at a veggie station of Potbelly's sandwich shop. I don't know if you guys have eaten there before. It's like an East Coast thing. I think I've seen it once in Portland, but they were everywhere. It was kind of like the Subway, but anyways, I had to memorize the like sub making process, and because I was on the veggie station, I had to remember the specific order of how the veggies had to go on the sandwich. And this was like not intuitive at all from like the 15 or so bins in front of me. Like they were like, hey, do this top left corner and then top right corner and then like middle one. And then, so if someone wanted all of the toppings, I had to memorize like exactly the order. And if they said something and then something else and they skipped around, I had to wait till they were done and then remember all of those. And so it was very convoluted. But sandwich, like, I'm not sure it actually had any impact on the user per se, right? Back then I didn't think about it that way, but nobody came back and said, well, my tomatoes were under the onions and they should have been on top. So I have no idea. Maybe there's some sort of science behind or research behind it. But sandwiches aside, I was always interested in the visual display of information, which was a combination of sort of information architecture and visual design. And I followed my passions in these two areas in college through mathematics and graphic design. So I majored in both. And then I meandered to a career in software engineering, then product management, and finally realizing like what I was actually truly passionate about is more product design. So it's kind of like full circle back to my graphic design degree with like more of a data-minded skill set after having gone through those previous careers. So kind of meandery, but still very like tech oriented.
Well, I don't know how did you ended up remember well all the things going. I was like, I wouldn't be so bad at that. But I love the circle, and I feel like is always surprising. I feel like I hear a lot of people going into like development product and they stay on as a product manager for a while, but I think it's really powerful that you came back so just move into design and staying there. Yes,
there's a lot of overlapping skills.
Yeah.
So yeah,
definitely. Dan, what about you?
Yeah, much like Ildikó and many others, finding my way into product design. My mother's a career artist, so I was always drawing throughout my whole life, and went to school for graphic design, and then graduated during the Great Recession, 2009, and it was almost impossible to find a design job. So at the time, I took a bunch of usability testing studies as a participant and just trying to piece things together. And it was an interesting little moment in my life because it actually really opened my eyes to research, user research, and these types of things. But eventually I did get a job in design, interactive 3D web tour creations of hotels and restaurants type of thing. Did that for a couple of years. I had also simultaneously fallen in love with craft beer and wanted to get in on that industry. And so I decided to pivot, and I wanted to brew professionally. And so I entered the world, the lowest rung of the ladder on a packaging line, a keg line, actually. And still wanted to brew, and opportunities were limited. So I moved out to Portland, Oregon, where I found a job on a bottling line, but really with the intentions of brewing. Ended up getting an opportunity to brew at Portland Brewing and Pyramid Brewing Company, where I really fell in love with process refinement and manufacturing all these elements of efficiency and process refinement. And it really sparked my curiosity of, it really fed into this passion and love I have of refining processes and striving for efficiency and optimization. Cutting to the chase here, ended up working in product strategy and beer sales, and learning how to interview people and understand what they wanted and needed, and understanding what resonated with folks on the beer aisle, looking at packaging there, and actually just walking up to folks and asking why they were picking that 6-pack over the other 10,000 in the aisle. At the time, one of my best friends, Holt Pagano, had begun working as a UX designer and really inspired me to consider pivoting back towards the design world. I joined tech by way of a brewery management software company out in Hillsboro, Oregon, called Orchestra Software, where I worked there for a couple months. It was kind of a perfect segue between tech and beer, and from there worked another role at a entertainment ticketing third party type platform called Gold Star Events. I was furloughed because of the pandemic, and then I found my way over to Vacasa, where I've been for the last 2.5 years, and really, getting to express that side of myself that loves process refinement and efficiency and understanding the psychology of decision making.
Love it. And I mean, I feel like you just keep throwing at me like unique things about you too. I love it. Okay, but I feel like everything looks kind of happy and like perfect, but we all know that life is not like this, and there is always roadblocks in the way. And I feel like if we talk to a lot of people at this moment, getting into UX design is not easy. So what are the biggest roadblocks on the field that you have at that moment, or any maybe even happening right now? So maybe I will throw it back to you, at you then.
Yeah, been thinking about this, and I think one of the biggest roadblocks, honestly, are portfolios. I think I personally actually don't find them necessary. I think they're actually can also sometimes be discriminatory. Imagine a single parent who's pressed for time, trying to keep the lights on, tend to kids, and do their job. They may not have time for a portfolio. Do they deserve a job in the industry? Yes. If they are skilled and qualified, of course. I had to put together a portfolio full of fake projects. All the time I spent these fake case studies, and it's just like, I simultaneously was also learning tactical, methods of research and also strategic approaches. But when I, as a hiring manager at times and part of a hiring team, I'm so much more interested in understanding, how somebody can speak to a role and speak to what they will be doing. If they can articulate how, what they've done, perhaps some analogous experience, like I was mentioning in beer sales and product strategy, interviewing people, that is very much applicable to what I do on a daily basis. And so I would much prefer to have a conversation with somebody. It's much harder to fool somebody into getting hired than having endless amounts of time for some folks, to put together a portfolio. And so, yeah, I have a lot more to say on that, but I'll stop right there. I'm interested in hearing what Ildikó has to say.
I mean, we can have a whole episode about this for sure. Ildikó, what about you?
So mine was a little different to start with, because I have background in a lot of different areas, starting with software engineering that I did at Intel for 4 years, and then some product management, business analysis. There was just a lot of skills I had. And so I thought it was a plus. I'm like, oh, I can do everything. But everybody knows that there's no such thing as a unicorn. Like, I could do those things, but I wasn't really that stellar at any of them. So I actually had a really hard time making my portfolio. So I guess it sort of crosses over with Dan's, because I was like, what do I show? Like, I can code, sure. I can learn how to code, whatever. Just throw any language at me. Like, I can learn it. But really, it was confusing to people, because, as a product designer, they're looking for certain set of skills, and coding might be like, oh, a nice, interesting bonus, but it's not really the focus. So I just really had to try to tailor what my skills were, and not necessarily say like, I can do all these things. It's just more like, I'm good at these things. This is what I'm interested in. And even if I'm not like that good at it yet, because I'm new, I could just say, I'm very interested in the interaction design part of the UX design process. I've done everything, but this is what I'm interested in. And then like kind of a subtitle or sub bullet or whatever mentioned in an interview, say, oh yeah, and I coded my portfolio, by the way, or whatever extra thing that might be like more of a bonus. But don't try to say everything because it's just confusing to everybody. So I actually had a lot of trouble narrowing it down. Like, it took me probably a year or so after completing an apprenticeship to like really narrow down what my skill set was and create a portfolio that actually got me into a job. Yeah, it's tough out there. I know, especially right now, even for us senior designers, it's not easy. So I can only imagine.
Yeah, definitely. No, thank you so much for sharing, and I love this. And I mean, I know that I'm still asking a lot of questions that don't go to our topic yet, but I feel like this comes to how we as a designers keep gathering all this information, and we use it in different ways. So we're almost getting there. But what have you enjoyed the most and least about what you do as a designer? Ildikó, let's go back to you again.
Well, I kind of I was thinking about this question, and I think I liked enterprise specifically. It was fun because you had a lot more easy access to your users, people that use the product, because they were also employees of the company. So just to clarify, enterprise, when we say enterprise tools or internal tools, it basically just means that anything that we're working on, I think both Dan and I, we basically made products for internal employees or contractors of that company to do their job. So very utilitarian. It's not like, it's not like a Facebook app for users, for external users. It's more like, I need to do my job, give me the tools to do those things. So what I really enjoyed at La Casa specifically was creating lasting relationships with these people. So I knew that I could go back to them over and over again and ask them like, hey, how is that new thing we just released? Or is there anything that you're still struggling with since the last time we talked? And creating that trust is just, I don't know, it just makes me feel really warm in a way. And I know they could also contact me with requests, complaints, or even like, wow, this works really well. And also kind of because these were internal employees, like this is why this works. Like with external employees or external users or customers, this isn't the same thing. There's not like a transactional relationship. It's more of like, we're in the same team. We're, it's a relationship that's more like a friendship. And even after I left Picasso, there's still people that were, so-called my customers or my users, and we still talk and we still, check in on each other. So that I think is like just one of my favorite things about it.
I mean, I think everybody, all designers would love to be able to just, hey, let me call you and ask you some questions just like that. Is not accessible to everybody. So yeah, that's a really cool one. Dan, what about you?
Yeah, in terms of enterprise product design at Picasso, kind of echoing what Ildikó said there, I've worked in e-commerce, for example, and half the battle is just finding the right people to talk to, the right people to recruit as participants. And when I have folks at my fingertips, ready and eager to work with me, talk about efficiency. Like it allows me to jump into research so much more quickly. The other element too is I feel like working on enterprise tools, refining workflows and processes for my colleagues, the folks at my company, it really makes me feel like a part of the team and a team player. And I'm such an intense believer in it transcends professionally into my personal life, but taking care of your home front and tending to things at home, keep remaining regular and orderly in order to go out and dominate the industry, for example. It's amazing. It's an amazing opportunity. And yeah, there's a Flaubert quote: "Be regular and orderly in your daily life, so that you can be violent and original in your work." And I'm just such an intense believer in that. And so that's definitely my favorite part. And then my least favorite part is, echoing Ildikó's point about how utilitarian our work often is. It's not sexy. It's not flashy. It's not meant to be. It's meant to work well, quickly, efficiently. And, it's not customer facing. And so oftentimes, I've seen at our organization, others, there can kind of be less of an emphasis on internal refinement of processes when we're so worried about how we appear externally and how we are handling our customers. It's all critically important, but there's just not sometimes there's just not really the investment that there could be. You really get out what you put in when you take care of the tools that people are using at your company. And Vacasa has done an amazing job standing up an enterprise sector of our design team to invest in these areas, but not every company does, and so it can be really a major differentiating factor when you do.
Love it, and I feel like these two things kind of take us into what we came for. That is like, how can really impacting or empowering our stakeholders, co-workers, is going to really impact the organization, the final user. So what do you think has been the most surprising for you, and have helped you to succeed your job and be so excited? I mean, I love when people get excited about what they do, and it's like, I love this. So what do you think that it has been something that is like, I didn't know that this was going to be so useful, and it's been like the biggest, I don't know, impact in your career, and it's something that you talk a lot about. Oh, Dan, you're ready. Yes.
I think I'm so incredibly grateful to have discovered evidence-based product development. I find it thrilling, and I didn't ever imagine that my natural curiosity about other people would be something I could center a career around. But finding my way back into tech and focusing much more on UX and research, user research, it feels like me. It's who I am, and my natural curiosity about what illuminates people, what inspires them, and why they make the decisions that they do. I didn't realize that I could center a career around my natural curiosity, and it's thrilling.
I love that. Yes. And then seeing that people really cares about that and makes an impact is just even better. Ildikó, what about you?
Well, something that this isn't really related to enterprise, but it's less profound. It's almost like way too easy. But I've worked as a contractor as well as a full-time employee. And, someone starting out might be like, well, what's the difference? Like, why, even, I mean, of course, there's logical differences or, tax differences or whatever. But when you're working as a contractor, there's less of an expectation that you respond to things very quickly. I mean, within 24 hours or 40 hours, that's kind of like, or more like a freelancer. It's not like you are on demand all the time. You just need to get kind of work done. And so that mindset works great as a contractor and internal employee. As an internal employee, I found that you can't really do that. I mean, it seems almost like duh. Like you can't just like make someone wait for like a while. So this has worked wonders in increasing trust with my team and increasing trust even with the users that I, interview and email back and forth with. Is just get back to people as soon as you can. And I know that sounds kind of like stressful potentially, especially if you have a lot of people emailing you or messaging you. But there's ways to navigate that. I usually put blocks of like, do not disturb, like 2 or 3 hours on my calendar. And then, or even like auto reply saying like, I'm working on something very important right now. I'll get back to you at 4 p.m. or whatever. But just getting back to people immediately and saying, I got your message, let me work on this. Or if you can just respond real quick, that's also great. So this can really make the almost impression that you're working faster, where it's not really true because you still need time to do your design work and really think about things or do the research or whatever, but it just gives this impression that you're actively like looking at your messages, you're actively collaborating with your teammates. And it's kind of like, I feel like it's like a trick. It's almost like it's an easy trick that you can do as a someone coming in as a junior or any level designer really. But if you're a junior designer and you want to make impact, just get back to people, be responsive, and that will it'll just improve trust in your team, I think, very quickly. And that's my recommendation, I guess. And
Nice.
It's surprising, it's like, oh, why is that so important? But it really does make a difference.
Yeah, I feel like okay, someone is paying attention to me and they're not ghosting me. Like, yes, like you see me. I love that. I want to go back a little bit about how your enterprise tools have helped people, and how that reflects in the other side. Like how you see that is helping, yes, your coworkers, but how is that taking outside of that circle and is going beyond that? I don't know if you have like an example or like an anecdote. Is this a Spanish? And I'm going to say it in Spanish. Anécdota of like something that happened to you. Oh my goodness, I forgot my English.
The first thing that comes to mind, if I understand your question correctly, how like the work we do trickles down to the customer. A project that I just wrapped up, it was about a year-long project focusing on our relocation services team. And just as a reminder and some context, Vacasa is the largest vacation rental property management company in the country, and about 44,000 units, 1.5 million reservations a year. And about 3% of those annually experience some type of disruption where we have to relocate the guest to another unit. Sometimes it's months out and, there's a hurricane and a roof blew off and, we'll move you over to this place. Other times, either the guest is in the home or they're pulling up to the property and they just found out that this multi-$1,000 vacation has been disrupted. And so this process that the team was doing previously was intensely laborious, hundreds of steps just to manage one individual situation. And you can imagine the anger and frustration that a guest might be experiencing naturally. I mean, I probably would too. And so this workflow that we just debuted several months ago, about 4 months ago, has decreased the amount of time it takes to handle a relocation case by 60%. So you can imagine so one of our main objectives there was reducing the amount of time it takes, but also, personally, I want to also improve this process for our folks internally. These are my colleagues. Again, like I care about them. They're helping me refine this process and I'm helping them. And so being able to reduce the amount of stress in their daily life and their daily work and reduce the amount of time it takes to handle a case naturally allows for more time. It frees up more time for them to focus on the wellness of the guest. And, I think it's a safe assumption when you experience some type of disruption as a guest like this, you want this resolved as quickly as possible and as well as possible. And so I found tremendous satisfaction in being able to reduce that process. And then also for the business, we just got data yesterday that it's reducing the cost of relocations by $1.7 million annually. So, it's good for the guest, it's good for our employee, and it's good for the business. And it's a great time.
Yes, that looks so good. Yeah, I mean, and again, I feel like, again, your coworkers and people that they were dealing with that, pulling their hairs, and now it's like, okay, yes, I can relax a little bit and put my energy in something else that it will be again more impactful for my health and for the whole organization. And happy people make more happy people. I think that's right. Another way to put it. So what about you, Ildikó?
I'll go into my example, but first also saying that the fact that Dan has that data to back up that it actually, how it helped the business improve not just the process, but their checkbook is amazing. And I think it's just like showing collaboration between Dan and like product management too, because they probably have a lot to do with finagling how that data is like pulled in and presenting it and making sure that the value of the work that Dan completed is very, very clear. Because that is one of like my sort of least favorite parts about enterprise UX is it is really hard to show like monetary, or it's generally hard, unless you set up the project that way. You're like, okay, this is how I'm going to pull in the data and all that stuff. But I love that project a lot. I was there while it was going on, and it's just amazing how well an internal process improvement can reflect out to the customers. My example is about a project I did while at Vacasa. So a little bit of context. It was this sort of 1 or 2 times a year deep clean. So you can kind of think of it as like a spring cleaning in these owners' homes. And so Vacasa has internal employees who do housekeeping. We also have contractors, but they have a whole team in different locations, and they'll send people out to clean homes, not just between guests, but in these like spring cleaning times where these cleans take up to 3 times as long. So a big house might take 2-3 days to clean. A lot more intensive. They'll pull out like appliances or just do a lot more thorough job of cleaning. So this process was entirely invisible to the owners because we had a lot of spreadsheets and stuff. So tracking was very, very manual. And mainly the owners would just get a note saying, hey, we're going to do deep clean. It's going to cost $600. And they're like, what? Like very surprised a lot of times. And that was, the end customer, number one, kind of like not happy there. And with the improvements that we made, we were able to just say, okay, this is the process, like very clearly across the board, because also different markets had different, like the manager would be like, oh, well, this owner is going to, flip their lid if we charge them more than this much money. So Vacasa would eat some of it. It's like, complex process, but essentially we reduced it down to actually cost a little bit less for the owner by doing it right after a guest stay. So the guest would actually pay for, not like, hey, guest, you need to pay more money, but the amount they pay for the cleaning fee would go into that amount. So it reduced the cost for the owner, reduced the cost for Vacasa. And so that's good. But then also we had this tool which allowed the housekeepers to take pictures of what they did. And I think this tool existed previously for in between guest stays, but there were very few pictures they could take. With the deep cleans, they could take a lot more pictures, a lot more places, and then this by itself was just good information for the managers. Now, we did have to work with another team, the owner team, to actually get these photos served up to the owners. But that is one thing, like one of the number one things they were asking for, like, we want to know what was done, like, why does this cost so much, like, what's going on? I want to see a picture of my house, like, more often than, when I asked for it. So that has been awesome. And obviously many other designers and managers and people worked on that side of things to actually show it to the customers. But without the pictures, without the infrastructure behind it that my team worked on to have that data basically ready for the other team to serve up, that would have never happened. So that's my anecdote or story.
I love those pictures before and after. I think, who doesn't like that? Yes, it's like I can see where my money's going. But yes, I mean, it wasn't like how just one, I mean, it's not a little thing, but just one little thing just keep trickling into like so many different users that it can impact in so many different ways. I mean, you two are like in like senior lead positions. What about those who are not? People, designers who are just studying and is like, I'm a junior designer. I want to impact too. how can I impact and how can I start putting these skills to my advantage, to my team, to my company, and at the end, to the user? Dan,
Um,
yes.
I mean, I think I would start on the topic of imposter syndrome. I think the reality is that most people experience it, and honestly, if you're not experiencing it, maybe take a look at things, because I think there's a healthy amount. But I think for junior designers, owning that they're here, they're doing it, and they're doing the work, and just own their story, own what makes them unique, and what unique elements of themselves that they can bring to the table, and also just be ready to learn. Be really eager to learn and show up, keep showing up, ask a lot of questions, and own what you don't know. You don't need to fool anybody pretending we know something we don't. It's really respectable when somebody doesn't know something, they own it, and they work to find the person to who they should speak with to learn how to do X, Y, or Z. So that would be my advice for the junior designer.
Nice. Yeah, I love it. I mean, and at the end of the day, we are all learning something, and we are, even if we're in different levels, there is something new that we can learn and something new that we can improve. So, yeah, I mean, again, we're coming back to the curiosity that you had at the beginning. So just keep engaging with that.
Yeah.
What about you, Ildikó? Yeah.
So as a junior designer, and this goes actually not just for junior designers. I love that Dan mentioned imposter syndrome. I listened to a podcast a while ago, and they were talking about imposter syndrome across, all industries everywhere. And they were saying, like, guess what? Rihanna has imposter syndrome. Like, people that are like at the top of their game actually have imposter syndrome almost more, because they don't really have anyone to talk to. And it's kind of like looked down upon that, like, if you're so good at something, or, you're perceived as to be so good at something, your own flaws. And so you're like, I'm not so sure about myself, but I can't talk to anybody about it. So and maybe as a junior designer, someone starting out, like, know that these people that are more senior than you, they're probably feeling similar things. It's not just you. everybody goes through that kind of thing at all parts of their career. And so one way to kind of get past that, I think, is building trust with your team, like when you're hired on first. And I mentioned, one of the ways to build trust is respond quickly. Dan's point about asking questions, showing up, being there, being curious, and raise your hand when something needs to be done and you think you might be able to do it. And even if you're not so sure, you could be like, I'll try it. I'll give my best effort, and improve that trust. And so I actually have an example of how I had imposter syndrome starting out at Vacasa. And I, as a more senior designer, I'm like, okay, I've done stuff in the past. So I'm like, I know this worked in the past. Let's just go for it. So as I came in, I was like, let's do this and this and this. And I completely just started just telling people what we should be doing, instead of taking a step back and saying, how do you guys work? And just taking time to listen to what the process looks like, learning how the current way is, and really just understanding the people I need to work with for not just a week or two, but like months. Just get through it, kind of sit there and absorb that, be a sponge, right? So start with that. And then once there's more of a trust and understanding between you and your team, then you can start saying, well, why don't we change this and maybe move it, like do this instead of that? Or can we add this step into the process, or whatever it is. And as a junior designer, you may not know that. You may be like, I have no idea what to add in. But if you do have ideas and you have built that trust, you can always ask and see what people think about it, right? And so I think that's a really good way to just go about things when you start out.
Yeah, I feel like just knowing your team and what they like and how do they like to have processes, communication is like a good way just to start knowing people and just get into the vibe of the organization. I don't have this question on my list, on our list, but I was thinking, now that the two of you have like a lot of experience in like creating tools for internal use for enterprise, I feel like as a designer, even though I work, I mean, my work is uh, uh oh my goodness, client facing. I feel like me still as a designer can do enterprise work, even there is not like an enterprise team. I don't know if this makes sense what I'm saying, but it's like, what do you think that I can do to make my team's life easier, um, without having like a specific tool and a specific team to create something? Does it make sense what I'm asking?
Yeah, I think so. I think I know you're asking, and what it reminds me of. I mentioned at the kickoff of the show. Half of my role is leading product design for the enterprise space, but then the other half is owner accounts and tools. So our web experience as well as our native apps, iOS and Android. And my focus is our homeowners, right? But I spend a lot of time still talking with our owner support folks. I mean, they are the closest to our customers, and I can't help but stumble across inefficiencies in their daily life and what frustrates them, or what I mean, just listening to them and hearing they what friction they're experiencing, and telling them that it doesn't have to be that way necessarily. So I guess circling back to your question, something you can do is just find those opportunities anyway, even if it's not your responsibility, and expose them to those at the company with influence and who can dictate direction, and then let the facts lie there. And you can make the strategic decision to act upon them, and inspire folks to get behind it and find resources and funding for them, or you can continue to ignore them and miss an opportunity. But just shedding light on them is something you can do, and let the chips fall where they may from there.
Yeah, I love it. And I think it goes back to pretty much everything that we've been talking a little bit, is like, again, Ildikó, yours was like, oh, if someone messaged me, I would just say, hey, I'm there. So like you were saying, like, I'm contacting customer service. They're telling me all the frustration. I'm listening. I'm saying like, yes, it makes sense. And it's time to share this. So I feel like it's like how we can make people being seen and their issues seen, even if it's from the inside.
Totally.
Love it. So Ildikó, what about you?
Well, I agree like with Dan, and I think it's great to take those and put it in your back pocket or whatever. But a lot of times it's like, how do you do that in practice, right? And I actually did this when I was at Vacasa. I just started a Google Doc. I mean, of course, you could do this in Dovetail or a spreadsheet or whatever. But every time I talked to a user, or got an email from them, or heard something from my product manager that was deprioritized, and whatever, wherever the source is, I just put it as a piece of fact on this. Like, it's kind of like a scrapbook, like you just put all this stuff in there. And over time, especially if none of these are being acted on, you might see patterns. You might see things come up more than once. So that'll start making you see like, okay, this wasn't just like a one-time thing or one person thing. It is coming up more than once. And so, if I have a Google Doc that's 10 pages long, and I have the opportunity to talk to like VP of product or whatever, I'm not going to throw all of this stuff at them. It's going to help me, like, the patterns will help me say, okay, well, I've seen this thing more than once. It's clearly a pain point, and I know we don't have funding for it, but this is what I see. And so not only does it help you narrow down like the things you're hearing, you're not just like hearing them and then trying to remember them. I know there's some people that are super good at remembering things, but then of course you're like, I heard this, but then you don't have any screenshots, you don't have any quotes. none of that, like who it came from, what context it came from. But writing all that down, and even as any level designer, if you're just talking to anybody and you're like, that's interesting, write it down. Like just write it down, because at least for me, I forget things really, really a lot. So that's what I would do practically, is just write things down, screenshots, quotes, anything that's like a scrapbook like kind of thing, where it may not get prioritized. Nothing on that list may not be, but at least it's there, and at least it makes I feel less overwhelmed when I have this, because I've put it aside and it's no longer my brain, and I know I wrote it down. And also, it might not be something that I'm actively working on, but at least like I did my job, part of the job, which is identifying it.
And again, it could happen that these go to like action and something happen. And again, we go back to, even though these didn't come exactly for the user, but is helping, in this case, our client support. Now we take that over from client support and we put it in somewhere in the product. Now, again, they have more time. Our users are better, and everybody again is happy and doing a better job. So I hope that this makes sense for people that is watching us. Is like, little things can have big impacts. So just being curious, be present, and keep trying to do the best that you can and keep learning from others. Any other advice before we say bye?
I had one more comment on that too. Something that I've found really fun too is if I find something, like just some information that maybe not related to what I'm working on, and I just let it sit there. And then some point in our, design meeting or whatever meeting, someone else brings up something about a completely different vertical and something about how they're working on a project there. And then I might actually have this happen before, where I'm like, oh, but I heard this over here, which is related to that over there. And so you're able to connect those people, and they're like, oh, sweet, can we talk to them? And so I was able to say, okay, go talk to this person because they mentioned something about that. And so it's a really good way to kind of get participants to the right people. And it gives them a different perspective, because it may not be the direct user, but it may be somebody one step away or something like that. It's just really cool to connect that. It's like neurons connecting from two opposite sides of the brain.
Yeah, I love that. Totally. I love connecting people. Yes.
And I mean, in terms of last little bits of advice pertaining to enterprise design, I think like finding the opportunities to get your hands dirty. Ildikó, for example, worked on the field app that managed cleans of homes. She would go out and actually clean homes with folks, getting into the trenches, And when I started with Vacasa, one of the conditional elements of joining was that I negotiated actually prior to joining the design team, joining the customer support team for 2 weeks and actually going through their entire training program, getting on the phone and getting yelled at by home or guests, or whatever, fielding emails, but just getting your hands dirty, getting in the trenches, it can like expedite developing empathy in an incredible way. So I think like just finding the opportunities to get out there and empathize with the population that you're seeking to serve is my biggest piece of advice.
Yeah, I love it. This was so good. I feel like I have a list of topics that we can talk next. But thank you so much, both of you, for making it today and for being so patient with me. I love the conversation, and wish you the best for this weekend.
Thank you so much for having us on. This has been fantastic. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much. Everybody, take care. Thank you.